What is God's grace? God's grace is not his mere kind attitude towards human beings. God's grace is what we in Orthodoxy would call his uncreated energy. That's his divine power that is effective in transforming people into making them actually righteous in reality. So when someone says we're saved by grace, or when Scripture says we're saved by grace, it doesn't mean that we are gifted a legal status in an instant as an act of kindness. What it means is that we are transformed to be righteous as a result of receiving the energy of God, in this case through the sacraments, through baptism, through confession, through communion, and other things. And so it's important to make that distinction, because that understanding of grace has massive ramifications and consequences for how someone interprets the Bible, because the Bible does not actually tell us that grace is God's undeserved kindness. That is something that men came up with later, and the man who actually came up with that is Martin Luther. He's the first theological writer that we have using grace in this manner, to say it's his undeserved kindness. Because look, if it's an undeserved kindness, then it's easier to interpret Scripture in a way where you don't have to do anything to receive it. Versus if it is an energy or substance of God, then it is possible that that substance comes through the sacraments. Now, Scripture does actually give us some good reason to think that grace is God's power. So 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9 says, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. So it equates God's grace and God's power. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 10 speaks of God's grace working in Paul to make him behave righteously and to work hard for the faith. I think it's 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 9, or maybe it's chapter 9, verse 8, I can't remember, speaks of grace in a similar way, of grace working in someone. So approaching the Bible just as it speaks, right? There's not a reason to think that grace is merely undeserved kindness. Rather, as all Christians believed for 1,500 years after Christ, grace is the power of God that we receive through the church, through the sacraments.